soccer to me, my older brother's a professional soccer player. I grew up in his footsteps. I just thought that was maybe something I wanted to do. Just loved growing up. I was an Arsenal fan and he was a Chelsea fan. And I think I picked Arsenal just so that we would have a rivalry. And so growing up, that's kind of what my plan was. And then I ended up not having the skill level that my brother did. And so I went to Puget Sound, which is Division III school in the Pacific Northwest. So in the Seattle area. And to me, what was interesting was every coach has a different style. And I'm more of I would say I'm less athletic. I like to view the soccer game as chess. That's just how I view it. And so I'm more on the technical side. And my coach we viewed it differently. So I didn't have the best college experience, but what it actually did was inspire me to go try to find that after college, which is rare. Most people say, I'm going to hang up the boots. I took the opposite approach where I said, I want to keep training. And so now I'm playing for a local semi-pro team and I kind of view it as never stopping. I just love it so much. Anytime anyone asks me for advice, I'm always like, listen, so much of it is luck, but you do make your own luck. And so when I was in Burnley, and I'll back up to how I got there, but when I was in Burnley, people could not believe it because Burnley, for those who don't know, is almost the Compton of England. I mean, it's a really tough area to live in and not a lot of wealth, and it's a tough area. And so what's so crazy is I came from Malibu to Burnley. So people thought I had mental issues. They're like, what's wrong with you? Why would you go from here? And what happened was there was a guy named James Perry. James Perry used to be the Liverpool FC U23 coach. And so he came to America and he started doing some private coaching. My older brother Zev was involved in that. I got to play a little bit. And then here I am. I'm in college. So I'm a freshman in college. And I reach out and I see that his dad, after a few training sessions, his dad is Rick Perry. And for anyone who looks up Rick Perry, he's the ex-chairman of Liverpool. So here I am, a freshman in college. I reach out on LinkedIn and I just say, hey, I want to get involved in the business world of soccer. I love soccer. Maybe I want to be a CEO of a football club one day. Not sure what I want to do. And I've got some interesting insight on that. But what happened was he basically said, hey, so a lot of internships right now, it's just not really a thing. You could go intern and be marketing, or you could do like learn more about transfers. But at these big clubs, it's almost like you're going to an Amazon. If you go to a Man City or a Man United. And so he said, you could go to one of those clubs and I can put you in contact. But my friend is David Baldwin and he's the chairman of Burnley. And I had really not heard of Burnley too much, to be honest, because they were just coming up in that year I went. And so here I am. And he said, you're going to get to be what's called basically the meeting taker. And so I would transcribe all the notes from the meetings. Anytime there's a transfer or any business deal, I was his assistant. And so what I did was I got to spend time literally with the CEO, transfers coming through. And the next day I was doing marketing work. And then I spent a week in security. I spent a week in ticket sales. So I did all of these different jobs. And the only reason I got the job was because I was crazy enough to reach out to this. Imagine you go train with a guy and then you find out, hey, that maybe his dad has something. And the only reason I figured that out was because I heard a little chatter that his dad was a somebody. So I looked him up, reached out on LinkedIn, sent him a message. He replied. And from there, we just had a few discussions. On a Thursday, he said, you want to go to Burnley? On a Monday, I was in Burnley, and it was literally a 3-day turnaround. So if you go to like a Man City, there's going to be interns. They're going to have a program. What was so cool about Burnley is that I was almost their first intern. They had never had an intern. They couldn't believe someone would want to come learn from them. And there was maybe 40 people at the club working versus a Man City where there's 600 people. And so when you're at a Burnley, it really is family. And I learned that when they were telling me a story about how one day Danny Ings was dribbling down the line, crossed it. Sam Vokes hit the post. And because he hit the post and didn't score, that goal would have got them first place instead of second place. And that meant their kid wasn't going to private school because that goal goes in and the tuition changes. Everyone gets a bonus. So what I viewed as, wow, soccer's fun, I now saw, wow, there's this business side to it. And so the craziest part is I thought I wanted to be a CEO of a Burnley or something like that. And what I learned was I didn't. And what I found was throughout all this time, I didn't want to come home after working in soccer all day and watch more soccer. And that's the first time it had happened to me. And so I found out maybe this isn't for me, but I really like the financial side of it. So that's how I've blended that into do what I do today, where I still play all the time. I still get to do everything. Um, but to answer your question, when it came to Burnley, I was really the only intern there. And I was really just the assistant to David Baldwin, who has since moved on and is now the head of the championship. So crazy. That's the thing is most people, there's a lot of internships out there, and I think they're always great to do because you get to learn what you do and don't like. And I thought that was what I wanted to do with my life. And kind of getting to see the passion slowly drain was interesting because all these people love soccer just like I did. But then what happens is your job becomes dependent on that, and it's hard to separate that, right? Your career and what your passions are. So what they did was to be very nice is they kind of said, listen, this is on your own. You want to learn how this works. This is on you. And so, which is kind of what I figured, but I spent my own money on the plane ticket. So went over there. Housing, they set me up with a nice situation, but I was still paying maybe 600 a month. So very cheap, but you're still paying something. But when I eventually did leave, they gave me a very nice check just to say, hey, thanks for all the work you did, which pretty much not fully, but it pretty much covered the trip for the whole time. So what I did, some of my job duties, which were really security, where I wrote out the whole stadium and made a roadmap of, hey, when people enter, is there a smarter way? You know, what entrances should we use? What shouldn't we use? I got to go into the locker rooms, and believe it or not, I bet your locker room was nicer than the away locker room at Burnley. And so the home locker room's pretty nice. You got a few toilets, they've got an ice bath, they got the whole deal. And they seated cushions, but the away locker room, I mean, I cannot imagine. I mean, I was not in a worse away locker room at Puget Sound because, and I asked Burnley, how is this legal? Like how, and they're like, we want teams so uncomfortable that if we can get any advantage to win the game. And I was just shocked because it was the worst locker room I'd ever seen. And it was a Premier League club. And it's kind of, there's famous stories about it now where the team, it's hard to give a team talk because some guys literally have to stand in the stalls to make sure there's enough people. So you've got a guy standing in a stall trying to hear Mourinho behind the bed. So it's like just kind of wild. And yeah, favorite things were I was in on the transfer when Matthew Loughton, who's the right back, and he actually scored a really good goal this year. So it's cool. But the two coolest things I did were whenever there were meetings going on, I didn't know, how does a team find a player? Like, what does that even look like? Like, we've all played FIFA and gotten to see the BBC report and all that, but what's really happening at a club behind the scenes? And it's really not that different than you would think, where I'm in a meeting, right? Then there's the chairman. We've got a few coaches on the left. We've got scouts, which is different, obviously. It's really like, hey, who do we think fits our system? You put them all on the table and you talk about it. And you say, okay, who fits the system? The financials come after, which is what I thought kind of came before, like who fits our budget. They're more so like, hey, we think this guy's awesome. And Matthew Loughton at the time was, I think, playing at Villa. So he was in the Premier League, and they're like, we want a good right back to help bring us so up to the standard of Premier League. And so that's how that discussion went. So I got to be the guy taking meeting notes. So I would take all the notes from the meeting, learn everything. And then anytime they had questions about what we talked about, I'd get to relay that. But my favorite part of the job was I got to be the guy during the Player of the Year awards. So every team at the end of the season, they give out 4 awards. They basically give out best young player. They give out a best player. They give out a best, like almost like a goalkeeper award, because the goalie's never getting any love, right? So you kind of have to have like a separate award for them. And then they give a player's Player of the Year. And that's the most important because it's who do the players vote was the most impactful. And I got to give the awards each time. I just would take them and give them to each player. And after, and this is kind of, it's not vulgar, but almost after what happened is there was a big party. And so I was in the taxi right after trying to help players get to go to the party event. So here I am, part of the event, doing the thing where I'm making sure everyone's getting taken care of, whatever, right? So we get into the taxi, and I'm trying to tell the taxi, I'm trying to coordinate, okay, we need a car for Tom Heaton over here. We need a car, whatever. And finally, I'm in the last taxi, and a few guys hadn't left yet. So I'm like, okay, they can come with me to the party. And it's Kieran Trippier, who's now playing at Atletico Madrid, and he's an England, national. And so what's crazy is I'm sitting next to Kieran Trippier holding his award. He's like, can you hold this for a second? And I'm shaking. He's like, why are you shaking? I'm like, well, you're Kieran Trippier. Like, this is crazy to me. And so that was kind of a cool experience. Is I was on the night of the big party. I was the guy holding all these awards of all the things that players won. And they were like, don't drop those. Like, those mean a lot. So here I am. And at the same time, they're trying to get me to drink with them because it's a party and they're coming up to the Premier League. And it was a special time because, as you know, Burnley aren't the greatest team right now. And so it's not like they're going to have fun years. But when you come up, it's a fun time. So they're celebrating. I'm holding all these trophies. They're trying to give me drinks and I'm trying to, so that was kind of a crazy night.
Yeah.
And so I got signatures of all the guys. I've got framed stuff all over my house. And so I grew up an Arsenal fan originally. Like I was saying, Zev was a Chelsea fan, my brother. And so that was kind of our rivalry, but Burnley they have a special place in my heart because of that. And just getting to, during work, during the summer, they're doing stuff on the grass, but I can always sneak on the pitch and go take a pen just to, feel like I'm celebrating, what would it feel like and all that stuff. I wasn't supposed to do that stuff, but didn't get to play with the players, but I did get to spend a few training sessions with the under 18s. And so I kind of got to get a taste of what it's like to play with Burnley players. And that was awesome. What I learned was that I kind of kept my own at a few of the drills, and then there were a few where I definitely didn't. And the 5v2, the stuff that you love, like me and you, where we're technical players, well, that's fun and it's awesome to play with these guys. But they were really trying to hurt me because they viewed it as this is my life, and they viewed me as, hey, this is some guy who wants to come play soccer, and so they were kind of out to hurt me, and I didn't really blame them. But luckily, I didn't get hurt. So very team collaborative. Every person that I was working around had been there over 15 years. So you're part of that Burnley culture. Think about what it's like when you work at any corporation. It's very rare that you get to celebrate something. Maybe you sell a big project. Maybe you create a product and sell it, and it's awesome that one time. But this is a family that Monday through Friday, and I didn't get to go to the games because I'm there during the summer, but Monday through Friday, they're working normal jobs. They're talking. It's good banter. It's very loose. It's no ties or anything crazy like that. And on Saturdays, or every other Saturday, because there's away games, but every Saturday, they're all getting together. They want Burnley to win. It feels really special. And so what I really like and I want to implement in the current company I'm with and whatever it is I want to do in my future is what's special is they have a common goal. And everything they do, whether it's writing a letter to a season ticket holder or making sure that the turnstile works better when someone goes through to go to the game, that's everyone's doing something with the goal in mind that we want to win on Saturday or Sunday, whatever. So it's a really special culture because not that often in life is there this way to, okay, let's work all week and then all week, Monday, okay, 5 days from game day, Tuesday, 4 days from game. It's like a countdown every week. And we've got this team coming up and there's this cool tension and you win and the city's alive. And so what's amazing is Burnley, and I could probably look it up, but I don't know the exact population, but there was 20,000 seats at Burnley. And so basically half the town was going to the games. And so it's pretty amazing. Imagine half of LA going to an LAFC game or something like that, Not that different than trying to get any job. I think most of these guys, like a Rick Perry, who was an ex-chairman of Liverpool, people go, well, he's never going to respond to my message. And yeah, I mentioned that I've trained with his son a few times, but I assumed he's getting these messages all day. And so I would say, really just find what it is you want. And maybe what it is you want, maybe you've never even heard of Aston Villa or you don't want to go there, but it's a small club. Maybe you want to go to a Crystal Palace because you want to live in London. So what you do is you go on LinkedIn and you look up Crystal Palace and you find some positions and you start messaging, and maybe you take advantage of the free trial for the month of LinkedIn and get the premium and send to connections. But it's really about going to their website, sending personalized email. There's now this awesome thing. I don't know if you're familiar with bombs, but instead of writing an email, what you can now do is send a video, maybe even, and it's recording your screen. And so you can kind of walk through a little bit about your profile, who you are. It's almost like, let's get creative, because you don't ever know if you do or don't want something, but there's only one way to find out, and it's go do it. And so people can definitely do that. I think people just don't know that's an option. And these people aren't getting reached out to left and right like I thought. And so anytime someone reaches out to me, just like yourself, I'm like more than happy to, give advice and do the call, because people just sometimes don't know. And it's almost just taking the leap. David Baldwin, who's the chairman, and I've since had communications with him. And what's interesting is there's always going to be a little bit of a power hierarchy when you go to any club or corporation, but it's going to be very different. Where if you're the chairman at Manchester City, there you might wave to some people at the front desk, but that's what you're going to get: a wave, a good morning. Let me go to my office, right? David would be like, "Hey, Kathy, how was your weekend? What did John do last? How's John doing in school?" I mean, there's a personal connection at a club like this. And so there's nothing wrong with going to a big corporation. You're probably going to get paid more. There's going to be benefits and all these awesome things with a Manchester City. But the power hierarchy was so interesting because I didn't know who was the head of marketing versus who was the lowest in ticket sales, and they treated me the same. And that's pretty special. And it's because it's a family. They want to win. They know it's a core group. The weird vibe is that when you're around these people, you don't know who's trying to move to a better team. And so that's the only like kind of sad downside is sometimes people are doing awesome jobs, but then they kind of just, okay, I want to move up to whether it's I want to go to a Leeds, or maybe that Leeds is not the best example for that, but maybe you want to go to Liverpool, or maybe you want to go to a Leicester or whatever. You don't know people's intentions. And so kind of in the background, I would say the lunchtime chatter was like, oh, I heard Jack is trying to interview at Liverpool. And so that would kind of be a little bit like almost a little bit of a bummer. It's like, do that on your own. But I would hear those conversations happen. But for the most part, everyone was super personable. I mean, the craziest stuff was really just getting into meetings and learning, okay, we not only have a rule to live by, and this is public knowledge, but it since changed, but Burnley's whole thing was, we're going to pay a player 20,000 a week, and that's the maximum in pounds. So look, it's a decent living, right? I mean, it's more than most people, but 20,000 a week in the Premier League is not crazy. And Mesut Ozil, somebody, even Wayne Rooney back in the day was on a super high salary. Look at Aubameyang, just signed a 350,000 a week contract, 350 a week, 20 a week. So, and they're sharing a pitch together. That's a very different life. And so what was special about Burnley is they had this rule that no one makes more than 20. So a bunch of guys were on this 20 a week. So it's cool because around the year, I'd get to go visit. Maybe half the day I'm in the office. The other half, I'd get to go to the training ground. I get to watch them play, help move goals, whatever. And what was super cool is that there was not tension on the training pitch because you're like, we kind of all know what everyone's making. Versus you go to an Arsenal and here you've got, Kieran Tierney, left back, making 180,000, and then Bukayo Saka, who's having a standout year, is making 15, 30,000 a week. So it's hard for people to kind of conceptualize what that means. But that's almost I make $5 million and live here, or I make $800,000. You're not a superstar. Aubameyang's driving around in crazy cars, and so that was not the vibe at Burnley. Burnley was very working class. Let's make sure we win. It's not beautiful soccer. And that's just kind of what the vibe. So don't know if that answered even a lick of the question you asked, but that's what I often do. Those players clearly, they'll come into the office. The office is a part of the stadium. So if you're ever watching Burnley on TV, in the upper right, you're going to see a blue box, and it's in FIFA, actually. That's where we worked out of. And so all week we're at the stadium. Oftentimes it's detached and you kind of don't feel you're part of the club. No, we were working in the stadium, overlooking the pitch all week. And the players would come into the office, whether it be to pick up a check or they want to make sure they have tickets for their spouse doing right, whatever. And that was what was crazy, is that translated onto the pitch, just like you're saying. I wouldn't have believed it either. I would have been like, I feel like it's kind of separate. They're out training. They know they have a job to do. But no, they come in and, they would call the ticket salespeople and be like, hey, Jackson, I need to make sure there's 4 tickets. My cousin's coming. It's like, what kind of player who's making 20,000 a week starting on the weekend, against Arsenal, is calling the front desk lady at Burnley and saying, hey, it's pretty epic. Pretty alone. So I got to live with a guy named Dale Robbins Bailey, who was in the sales department of doing hospitality. So you're selling, to local organizations, trying to get people to come in, and you're also making sure when the big names come, because a huge part of being the Premier League is that Manchester City's coming to Burnley. It was a big deal. And so if someone wanted to get a box, he had to be hosting them, make sure they have a good time. So I lived with Dale, and that was very nice because I got to share the experience with someone. And so at first it felt kind of alone. And then truthfully, I had really bad acne at that time. And so I was very embarrassed to go out often. I felt really bad to go to the extra events, that I didn't kind of required to go to. And so he kind of helped me say, hey, don't worry about that stuff. Let's go and do the thing. So he was a nice confidence boost when I did feel low. And we're about an hour away from Manchester. And so on the weekend, if I really wanted, I got really into Nando's. Just they have really good chicken, and so it's called like Cheeky Nando's over there. And so I would take the train, which is awesome. And you kind of get to see the train is almost like, not like Train to Narnia, but like it's pretty awesome views, and people don't often think about it. And so I'd get on the train, I'd go into Manchester, and I'd go find like a local five-a-side team. And normally they'd always say, we don't want you to play because, I don't look the part. I'm smaller and I'm more technical. I'm not going to run past 10 players, but I would get it. I'd play simple, and it's kind of fun to flip someone, right? When someone's like, oh, well, we don't want this guy on our team. And then they're like, oh, this kid, and then so it's cool. So still in contact with some of those guys. So if I were to lie, I would say, no, it wasn't an issue, but yeah, it was. There's times for sure where you're saying, okay, well, not why him, because it's deserved, but you almost say, we're always watching ourselves, and it's really hard to take an outside view and say, okay, what's going on here? Because the work and dedication he put in fully deserved to get where he is and everything he's gotten. But of course, a little part of you goes, I kind of wish I had that. And so growing up, what he did and what was great for both of us is we had a super healthy relationship where we were playing all the time. We were competitive. He made me better. I like to think that there's parts of me that made him better. So when he made a good pass on the field, it almost felt like a part of me was making the pass. And so that was really special to kind of get to be a part of his journey. I felt like I got to live through him, and in a sense where I didn't really have a great college experience and get to play now. In a weird way, I'm almost having that now. And so growing up, yeah, it was tough because I didn't really know if I wanted to be a pro, and I was kind of on the edge. I had always been very financially savvy, where I'm good with numbers, and I like to connect numbers to emotions because so often people are stressed by money. I went, well, it doesn't have to be that way. And so I kind of, the work I do now is assisting with that. And so what now I get to do is help soccer players with their money. And so I work with a lot of professional athletes and how to manage their money. And so here I am, almost still involved in the game, but very differently than as if I were at a club. So I found, okay, I don't want a Burnley where I'm working and then I go home and now I don't want to watch any more soccer. I was just over it. I heard soccer all day. And now I've got, when work ends, I'm watching soccer, I'm doing highlights. My girlfriend's always like, I can't believe you're watching this many highlights. And so I'm just crazy in that sense. And she does a great job to cope with that. And so my job now is, okay, how can I help professional athletes keep playing more? And so people like my brother, people who are in the USL or the MLS, those are players I get to now help support financially and kind of give them guidance so that when they do eventually hang up the boots, and more so about them making the choice to do it. And so that's the work I love to do. But to answer your question, growing up, there were some days where I felt, yeah, maybe, I wish this coach saw this, but I kind of started to learn, okay, maybe it's not for me. And if I want it, I got to commit to it. So I will never say, I didn't make it because a coach didn't see me or this didn't happen. I just don't believe that. It's really, okay, if you're going to go for it, you go for it and you go no regrets. And that's what my brother did. And that's why he made it. I was thinking, okay, I kind of like soccer. I really like it actually, but I've had a few bad injuries. And if I want to do it, it's a grind. You're going to tryouts and your body might not always feel the best. And I wanted to play my whole life and get to play all the time. And I still get to. And so I'm not at his level by any means, but I like to think I can sometimes keep up. I emailed them before I went and I was like, hey, what should I be expecting? Should I be prepping? And they didn't even reply. So I'm like, okay, I have no idea what I'm getting into here. They really didn't have a plan. Like, hey, here's a seat, take notes and try to be helpful. And so it's really on me to take the initiative. And there's a good and a bad. The bad is if you're a person who doesn't like to take that initiative, well, you're going to be bored and say the internship kind of sucked. If you're good, you're going to get to go, okay, I'm going to overstep lines. This is what I do. I kind of overstep lines where maybe I shouldn't even be doing so, but I just do it where I'm going to walk into the meeting and kind of offer water to a player. And then I'm just going to bring water back in and then and just sit down. no one asked me to sit down. No one said I could be in the meeting. But my idea is I want to learn from this. So let me go offer someone water so that I can then come into the meeting, sit down like I'm supposed to be there. And so I would walk into meetings all the time that I was not even invited to, just so I could sit, learn from them, and then be like, hey, I don't know if you noticed this from the meeting, and try to add a piece of value. And then they go, hey, who are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm an intern. They told me I'm in marketing today. Even though they didn't, I would just lie and say I'm in marketing today and then spend the day there. Like no one was overwatching and making sure I had a good time. It was more so about like, okay, you want to be around the club? Like you can do this. And at first it was almost like they're doing me a favor for a friend. And who knows if Rick Perry, who connected me, told David, okay, this is some guy in California and we're just doing this to be nice. I don't really know their conversation. I knew that I didn't really care because I'm going to take advantage of it. And so during lunch, I'm going to go out into, even if I don't even know if I can get in trouble, but I'd go out onto the pitch and take a pen, or I'd like do a knee slide. Like I would do crazy stuff just to feel like I'm part of the club. And so I really had a blast because I kind of didn't listen to rules. And I wouldn't say that's great for everyone, but if you do want to work at a club or do anything like that, there's going to be Amazons of the world, which is like a Manchester City, where it's going to be, okay, you're going to spend from 8 to 10, you're going to be here, and then you're going to have lunch. And then mine was just like, listen, do what you want. And like, I would be spending time around in the locker room all the time. I just like juggle around the field. I mean, I'm really a kid with the ball almost all the time still. And so wherever I go, I just kind of have to have one because it's just too fun. It's honestly too fun to me. I met Sean Dyche. They called him the Ginger Mourinho. Very nice guy. And I don't know if you've ever met someone where you're like, I just get their vibe. Like I just like that person, or I could see myself with that person, or I could be friends with that person. Like for me, I get that sense like 2-3 seconds into a conversation. And with Sean, we happened to be at one point just at a walking around a similar table. I just stopped him because that's the type of stuff I do, which is weird. And I say, hey, just want to let you know I'm an intern here. If you need anything, happy to help. And he's like, oh, awesome. Like kudos to you. How did you get here? That whole thing. So got to tell him a little bit about my story. And I just said, like, tactic wise, I know what you're doing is awesome, but is there anything you want to do different? That was kind of my question. And he's like, look, you work with the players you got. I want good people. If they're good players, that's a bonus. And so that was what was kind of interesting, is it's really people oriented, almost not more so than the soccer, because you have to have the quality. But if you look at the players we've gotten this year, like a Josh Brownhill, who's like a hardworking center mid, awesome guy. All of our players have no attitude versus, and I just hate to say it, but on my own team, Arsenal, which I support as well, like a Nicolas Pepe kind of has a bad attitude, a Aubameyang, he's late to the meetings. It's like that would not happen at Burnley because they just care too much. And so Kieran Trippier, I was like shaking in the taxi, and he's like, this guy's just a weird dude. I just couldn't believe it was him. And then Tom Heaton was probably the nicest guy. Just because he normally goalkeepers, I don't know if you found this in your experience, but they're always like a little weird. Like there's just something sometimes a little weird about, I don't know why, if they have to watch the game or they're not feeling part of it because they play a big role. But Tom Heaton was not that. I was like, this guy could be a center back. He's just a good dude. He just yelled Burnley through and through and had a great haircut. And so I was like, dude, this guy's just crushing it. He looks clean. And I was just like, I was a big Tom Heaton fan, and he kind of shifted me on goalkeepers' views. And so I've got good friends who are goalkeepers who are awesome guys, but I've also met some odd ones. So anyways, Tom Heaton, Kieran Trippier, Danny Ings, who's all tatted up, was like super nice guy. And so I was talking with all of them, by no means on a daily basis, but they'd come into the office, and I mean, if they have to pick stuff up or, like I was saying with tickets, but it was really that annual, player of the year meeting. And what was so cool is they spent an hour, the whole team, the hospitality team puts on a whole, it's almost like a show at the stadium where they're like, here's our 10 greatest goals and 5 assists and young player of the year. And, it's almost like you're going to a gala, and so everyone's dressed up. And the team, I was in the meeting, the team spent an hour deciding what song they want when players walk in. I mean, that's how much they care about this stuff. It's like an hour, and I wish I had the name of the song, but it was just like, wow, the detail that goes into this, and they cared so much. This is awesome. What I kind of learned from that internship was, okay, soccer is awesome. There's a stressful part of it. Do I want to connect that to what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I got to live with a guy who was in hospitality sales. And he's kind of like, look, you do that for a few years, then you move up, maybe you switch clubs and you keep working your way up, and maybe you're a CEO, and kind of that's the dream. And so I was like, I don't know, it just doesn't fit what I wanted. So the next year, I actually had the next job I did was I went and worked at a summer camp for a brief time. I think it was called Brant Lake. It was up in Brant Lake, which is upper New York. And I spent some time there. And the reason I went to that internship was it was the most wealthy kids in America were going to this summer camp. And so they paid the most to the counselors. And they were like, listen, these kids, they're very spoiled and you're going to be unpacking their luggage and like doing weird duties. But it's like, we're going to pay you a ton because no one else wants this job. And then I ended up luckily having that internship in Burnley. Looking back, it actually kind of did help because it's like, okay, you did travel internationally, you lived on your own. It shows a certain level of professionalism. I spent some time at Publishers Weekly in New York. And so when I eventually went to get new jobs and new interviews, they were like, okay, he's been in England, he's been in New York, and I've lived in North Carolina. So maybe it did help, but hard to say. There's about two that there's actually like I see someone's Snapchat stories, which is like I kind of like vicariously like live through this guy's Snapchat stories where he's posting like him at the game and crazy wins. So that's kind of how I stay connected. But there's two other guys, the guy I lived with, and then there was a guy who worked in security, just down to earth, nice guy. And so I'll stay in touch every once in a while. David and I actually do email back and forth, not a crazy amount, but Happy New Year and all that stuff. And so there's actually a frame I sent him of me and him together. There's a photo of us. Actually, no, it's not here, but there's a photo of us when I was an intern, and then I went and saw him 4 years later. Again, I took my brother to a game, and so we were together. So we got two photos, and I sent him like a frame side by side. So it might be up in his office right now. It's probably right near his desk if I had to guess. Because I'm just kidding, definitely not. This is a crazy one. Me and Zev went to Burnley. We just wanted to we love doing an England trip every year, going to watch the games. And so we went to Burnley against Man City, and they got smashed. But regardless, before the game, we had some time, and he said, "Hey, I want to show you guys around the stadium." So he's showing us, shows where I used to work, all the upgrades, and it's me, my brother, and David. At this point, maybe there's, I don't know, let's say 2 hours till kickoff. An hour in, he's still showing us, and he's like, and we're like, wow, like I got to imagine he's got stuff to do, right? Like, this is awesome. Thank you so much for doing it. So then at some point, let's say halfway through, we're walking around. So an hour and a half till kickoff. He's like, hey, he's showing us the gift shop and letting us pick out a few things. And he's like, you guys pay for that stuff later. Like, don't worry, we'll get back to that. So we're like, okay, so now we're getting a tour, and he's having us pick out merchandise, and it's like just kind of fun. But part of me is like, okay, it's too good to be true. Now we're in the players' lounge, and there's wives, and then there's food, and we're like, okay, this is crazy. And so an hour in, he goes, I'm so sorry, guys, I have to leave. And we're like, no, all good. He's like, yeah, Gareth's waiting. Like, Gareth? Yeah, I told him to wait because you were coming. And so he's been waiting an hour at the moment, and he's up in the box there, but he's coming to watch James Tarkowski play and Ben Mee, to think about bringing them to the England squad, and Phil Foden's on Man City. We're like, let me get this straight. Just to be nice around the stadium and what improvements has gone on, and kind of some fun meeting times I had back in the day. So we reminisced for an hour, and he made Gareth Southgate wait for that. So it's like pretty crazy that this CEO would take the time to do that. And just speaks to his character. And then at the end of the game, he said, I want you to come back to the players' lounge. We go through, the game ends. We come back into the players' lounge, and he's like, hands us these two big bags, and he had purchased all the merchandise for us that we had went through. I mean, we splurged. I mean, we were like, okay, we came here, we're going to get a lot of stuff. I don't know, maybe we spent a few $100 on new quarter zips and hoodies and sweatpants and the whole deal. And so it was really special for that, because he just gave us a special moment where most people would not wait for Gareth Southgate. He helped me out actually about maybe 3 years after I left Burnley. I flew on my own to Barcelona. I just wanted to watch Messi, so I flew to Barcelona, watched a Champions League game by myself, and then went to England to watch a few games, and Burnley was playing away at West Ham. So I was in London for the trip. And so he got me tickets. I said, hey, man, I'm going to be at the West Ham Burnley game. You got any extra away tickets? He's like, yeah, I'll put it in your name. So we chatted then, sent him a nice card. So I'm all about handwritten cards. So I sent him some stuff. He was just appreciative. And he said, yeah, I'll hook you up with that. So that was kind of our last message. Since then, maybe, a year and a half later, I was like, hey man, I want to come to Burnley. I've still this whole time, remember, I've not seen a game at Burnley because I was in there during the summer, was never really, and I was close with the people there. And so they're like, you got to come to a game. And so finally, when I came, they're like, you're kind of the only intern we've had. This is special. They're like, we've had interns since, but it's the typical intern of like, okay, I want to make sure I'm learning and doing the right things. And almost like there's a certain person who's like, I don't want to step on toes. And I need to have more of that. And then there's a certain person who's like, I need to make sure I'm taking advantage of this. And maybe they need to have more of that from me. But we both, humans have both sets to learn from. It's kind of about finding the balance there. But the biggest difference between American soccer and European soccer is summed up like this. When you go to an LA Galaxy game or a Quakes game, at halftime, oftentimes they bring on a bunch of 7-year-olds or 8-year-olds, and they just have a big scrimmage. And it's kind of like, okay, everyone's running everywhere. And in England, at halftime, the kids come on and they do 5v2. And it's just keep away. No one's going to goals. It's just like, let's use our brains here. And so they're really just technical. Okay, those kids. And it's almost a way to be like, okay, here's how Fulham, and that was at a Fulham game I was at, which was special, where they were like, okay, they do 5v2 at halftime. It's not about scoring and it's not about all this, kind of the athleticism. And so I always, you can't not think, wow, what if I got to grow up here? Maybe I would have been, so who knows? But I mean, I have a great life. I don't regret it. But it's one of those things where the difference is when you go play, like you said, soccer is a language. So I went to England, I went to Burnley, I was doing 5v2. I don't have to talk to them. We have an understanding. In America, I'll go to a pickup game and I'll leave that without having any understanding or relationship with the person, unless I, do a meg and score a goal. They're like, good job. But I do very little subtle things where the ball's coming to me. I'll just do a light set or, very subtle stuff that doesn't really get appreciated. Where over there, all those little things matter. And the coolest part was there were people overweight in like the Fulham program. And what was awesome was that it didn't matter. It's like, look, they've got the footballing brain. And so they're like, we can make someone fit. What you can't do is take someone who has no soccer brain and then try to make them something. So they're like, we'd rather have the brain and then change their physique and get them to the conditioning part. That's way easier. And then you look at an example today, like Adama Traore, who's just a super freak athlete, right? He's on Wolves, going down the line. It's like, this guy's a force of nature. Well, he came up in Barcelona, and they're like, we have a physical specimen who's just unbelievable, yet we cannot teach this guy. So they got rid of him. And so what's so interesting is, maybe if people like me and you got to grow up in a Barcelona in our life, we might be in a very different place than where we are right now. Say just go for it. Like so often in life, we kind of hesitate. We're not sure what makes most sense. And so what I would say is two things is it's as simple as go for it. And people say, okay, go for it. They kind of get like a hope of motivation. They want to go do it. It's like you go on LinkedIn. If that sounds like something that's interesting to you, you go do some research, you go to their websites, you make them a video. You almost do these weird things where you say, hey, John, I don't know what your life looks like, but here's what I'm looking for. Do you mind helping me point me in the right direction? Or is this something that you want help with? And always offer, which is, I would say, maybe not everyone's in that financial position, but offer to pay for it yourself. They're probably not gonna, people are too good to just say, hey, we're not gonna give you anything. We know there's a lot going on here, but to just say, hey, I'm willing to pay for this myself. Now, you don't want to do a bluff and then be like, oh, actually, and they say, great, come. And you're like, actually, I can't afford it. So you don't want that. But it's not bad to have that in the conversation of like, hey, financially where I'm at is here. And here's how much I want to do. I really want to make this happen. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? Something like that. Then the second thing is for any listeners here who really are interested in the financial side, I have a podcast now with Personal Finance Redefined, where the whole idea being is money is just stressful. It stresses so many people out. My parents grew up stressed out about it, just so many families. And so this is my way of giving back to say, okay, money doesn't have to be stressful, whether it's investment stuff, whether it's tax planning, whether it's getting an estate set up, there's all these things. And you almost like don't want to fill out the form wrong. And so when you're doing taxes or all these other things, I just view it the same way I view soccer, which is like, let's use mental chess, but I just use that with money. And so when I'm going to the field and I'm playing or I'm at work, I'm just doing chess. It's just soccer versus money. And so that's kind of how I view it. So if anyone has any interest, that's, a place they can go for some financial tips.